Growing up, most of us experience some kind of exposure to religion. Our parents and grandparents share or impose their views on us as kids. Our friends have opinions on the subject, sometimes even more strongly than our families.
Heaven is very real.
We hear opinions in the media all the time.
Almost has no place.
On Facebook, on Twitter, in the news. Even our favorite TV characters can influence our opinions.
These two planets.
And when we're kids, we eat it up. After all, if it's on TV, it must be true.
Mortal dread.
Let me be very clear. This country was not built for atheists nor by atheists. It was built by Christian people who believed in the Word of God.
My grandmother's a very spiritual person, and by spiritual I mean she watches televised religious broadcasts on her free time and believes that if you're not heterosexual and a regular churchgoer, you're in danger of going to hell. I remember one particular visit to her home in Tennessee. I must have been 11 or 12 at the time, during which she gave me about 10 large books that were simplified Bible volumes directed at kids my age. I have to give her credit, the books were very convincing and they did help me understand the Bible a lot better. I read and reread those books, and for the first time in my life I read parts of an actual Bible. Over the course of the next few years I became a very religious person. I prayed often, and despite the fact that I didn't go to church, I believed myself to be very in touch with God.
My experience with religion growing up was a mixed one. I grew up believing in God, but it was a subject I don't ever remember my parents talking about much. Not to me, at least. After we stopped attending church, the only person in my family who ever still talked about it was my father's mother. Of course, I guess she made up for everybody else's silence, but until I told my parents about this project and my desire to interview them, the subject really hadn't been broached for at least 6 or 7 years, probably more.
Or how did that happen, the whole Lutheran thing?
You're asking me.
I'm asking either one of you.
Let me give you my background. So I started off as a Seventh-day Adventist. That's how I grew up the first few years of my life. And my parents got divorced. And my mom was aligned more directly with the Baptists because of her family. And so I started attending Baptist churches. And I think in college, I met your mom and we decided to get married. And we actually got married in the Methodist church by a Methodist minister, right? So, because it was convenient, more or less, than anything else. And as we got further along with thinking about children and also trying to go to church in the community, we decided to go to the Lutheran church.
I don't suppose church has ever been a defining experience for my family.
I believe in God, but I don't necessarily worship Him.
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
Not that we weren't regular churchgoers as I grew up. My siblings and I were all baptized in the Lutheran tradition and we attended Sunday Mass.
Do you think we should go to church?
I think it would be better for us as a family.
Somehow, though, it was ensured that I read all the appropriate Bible stories. David and Goliath, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, etc. I still think they're great stories, but to a kid everything seems more magical. I loved them. I accepted them as truth.
God created the world.
There was some sort of falling out between the clergy and the congregation?
There seemed to be a falling out between sections of, I don't know if it was between the clergy and the clergy or the clergy and the senior leaders of the congregation, but something happened there.
Do you guys know what the specific issues were by any chance, or?
I don't think we do. I don't remember what it was.
Well, there was one pastor, or I don't know if it was a aide or so, that he was being accused of being a pedophile.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. So that, whether that was true or not, I don't know.
The falling out between the congregation and the clergy was something we'd never discussed before that interview. Actually, I feel like my family and I don't ever discuss much of importance. Anyway, we never spoke of religion outside of church or my grandmother's home. I think the thing about that that's most interesting for me, looking back, was that no one ever told me growing up what it was that God was supposed to look like. So my image of him for the longest time was of the moon with a smiling face and arms.
Of course, our sudden lack of church attendance didn't sit well with my father's mother, and she has been relentlessly trying to get us to go back ever since. To this day, we receive recorded discs of televised sermons by preachers like John Hagee and Hal Lindsey, and every letter she sends us, every call, contains a plea for us to go back to church in order to get saved. All that changed with the advent of high school. It didn't happen overnight, of course, but over the course of my time there, I underwent a significant change in my stance on religion. I suppose this was a result of the influence of my friends in combination with my tendency to overthink things more and more. One of my friends in particular, Sam, had a large influence on my beliefs. Sam was, and still is, a very vocal atheist and loved to talk about and debate the subject with anyone who would listen. He was always respectful in his wording, of course, but he did his absolute best to convince anyone and everyone that believing in God was wrong, that the Bible was bogus, and that he knew more about religion than most of the faithful. And to be fair, he did do his homework. He usually knew what he was talking about. But nowadays, I disapprove of that sort of atheism. I'll be the first to admit, though, that I was intrigued by the strength of his arguments against God. I still didn't become an atheist for a long time after meeting him, but Sam was the catalyst for my transition into agnosticism. Now, when I say agnosticism, I don't mean that I just went into the idea that I didn't know if there was a God. My agnostic period consisted of me trying to reconcile my newfound belief that the world was not as simple as the Bible depicted it to be, with my desire to continue believing. If not in the Christian God, then in a higher being of some kind. My favorite analogy for God at the time was that God is to humans as we are to dogs. Dogs will obey us with enough training, but there's no possibility of them ever truly understanding us. That worked for a while, up until I realized that to many humans, dogs are just entertainment. We buy them so we can have control over a being that'll love us unconditionally, sometimes out of a need for validation, and we train them for our amusement. If this is what we were to God, then I wasn't sure I wanted to be a part of that world anymore. That being said, I wasn't ready to accept being an atheist either. For a long time I was unwilling to admit it to myself, but I think deep down I knew it for a while. I probably first realized later in my freshman year of college. But it was such a final, definite thing in my head. I didn't want to commit, just as much as I didn't want to be the image in my head. I thought I might have to change as a person significantly. Additionally, I wondered what my family would think. I mean, I knew they wouldn't approve. I tried for over a year to rationalize the existence of a God. This was in part due to my impression of what it meant to be an atheist. I suppose my image of atheists is closer to what most people would consider anarchists or Satanists, and I'm really not sure why that is. I guess that's a comment on the fact that society, certainly religious society, treats them all the same way, as a threat. Of course, I know they're different, but I still can't rid myself of that image, and that really bothers me.
When I finally did accept that I was an atheist, it was because of that image that I resolved to be a calm, quiet one. As much as I was good friends with Sam, I didn't share his attitude toward religion, nor his desire to express it for everyone to hear. For a long time before I met Tony, I really hadn't had to question or think about my acceptance of atheism.
My whole fear of death thing is really not that fun to talk about. This isn't something that we differ on greatly enough to cause a lot of problems, I don't think.
Looking forward, I'm not really sure how this is going to affect me.
You're going to get married in the courthouse rather than maybe go to church, if that happens. If you have children, you're going to raise them in an atheist environment and never teach them about God. I mean, where are you at with it, I think is really the question.
I don't see any reason to reconsider my beliefs anytime soon. And even if I did, I'd just be lying both to myself and to others. Despite what others in my life may think, I see atheism as an extremely viable lifestyle, and it's one I intend to continue living for the foreseeable future.